What happens when a nation's leader arrives in the heart of Washington, D.C., only to find empty halls and silence? The world watched in shock as Vladimir Zelensky's plane landed, but there was no grand welcome, no signs of respect or solidarity. Instead, the Ukrainian leader was met with cold indifference. His mission was crucial, yet he found himself at the center of a diplomatic ice age. Zelensky's aircraft sat on the runway, a powerful symbol of a nation in turmoil. His delegation, consisting of a handful of officials, faced a grim reality: no one from the American government had come to greet him. The absence of American flags was palpable, the silence deafening. As he stepped off the plane, the cameras captured a moment devoid of hope. Only the sounds of rushing wind and the distant echo of a forgotten promise filled the air. In Berlin, discussions buzzed about a world gearing up to move on, not from a desire for peace, but from an unfortunate resignation. A so-called world without Ukraine was emerging, as desperation took hold of leaders. Words like mobilization slipped from their lips, but the meaning was clear: the loss of a crucial ally was becoming a reality. The world watched, wondering how it came to this. As Zelensky stood in the shadows, his heart heavy with uncertainty, he could almost feel the diplomatic frost settling in. The stakes had never felt higher. He was traveling to Washington, expecting dialogue and support, yet receiving nothing but silence and a bleak sense of abandonment. It reflected a jarring reality: no longer was Ukraine viewed as a frontline player on a grand stage. Instead, it had been relegated to a mere backdrop in a complex international scheme. The meeting was supposed to be a historic milestone but quickly morphed into a day of reckoning. Every protocol had been carefully outlined, yet the absence of senior diplomats was telling. The West had clearly rewritten its narrative. In this shifting landscape, who would stand with Ukraine? The echo of unanswered questions loomed heavy in the air, the gravity of the moment sinking in. Meanwhile, in Budapest, Donald Trump was preparing to meet with Vladimir Putin. The optics were staggering: a world where the President of the United States was drawn closer to the man whose actions had caused so much suffering. In his recent statements, Trump had hinted at plans to open dialogue with Putin, further solidifying the notion that Ukraine was losing its place on the global chessboard. As Zelensky waited for an anticipated conversation, a realization washed over him, a realization that would reshape the narrative of his nation. This visit was not about partnership. It was a subtle shift in priorities that would leave Ukraine on the sidelines. The core of the discussion was no longer about support for Ukraine, but rather how the West planned to navigate the precarious relationship with Russia. How did Ukraine's seek for aid transform into a show of indifference? Zelensky's team, once brimming with hope and anticipation, gazed upon faces that were more concerned with avoiding conflict than in standing by their ally in need. This stark reality marked a pivotal turn in the unfolding drama, a point of no return where the balance of power shifted dramatically. As Zelensky departed from what could only be described as a humiliating encounter, he was faced with profound questions about his future, his country's standing, and the alliances that once felt unwavering. While he exited the halls of power, Trump was gearing up for a different kind of dialogue, one where he would cultivate ties with Putin without consideration for a partner who had stood on the front lines for far too long. The diplomatic landscape was changing, but what would this new world mean for Ukraine? Would Zelensky find himself fighting a battle not just for his country, but for recognition and respect? As he returned home, heavy-hearted but resolute, one thing was clear: the fight was far from over, and the world would be watching closely as the next chapter unfolded. The situation has drastically transformed. Gone are the elaborate ceremonies and enthusiastic welcomes for Ukraine's leader. Instead, a heavy silence hangs in the air. This visit feels less like a partnership and more like an afterthought. Zelensky's arrival in Washington, which once promised hope, is now marked by an absence of expected fanfare. No grand displays, no reporters clamoring for soundbites, only one state operator capturing what feels like an empty moment. As Zelensky lands, it's painfully clear that this is not the royal treatment accorded to an ally. The lack of even a low-level dignitary to greet him amplifies the sense of neglect. In their haste to re-establish the status quo, America is signaling that respect is not on the agenda. While Ukraine's importance is undeniable, it seems the calculus has shifted. Washington has recalibrated its priorities, focusing on managing the delicate dynamics with Russia, particularly in the wake of Trump's unexpected maneuvers. Rays of sunlight struggle to pierce the overcast sky as Zelensky steps onto the tarmac, his expression a mix of determination and trepidation. The absence of American flags and the palpable tension underscore a stark reality: Ukraine has transitioned from a key player in a global drama to a peripheral figure. It's almost as if they are now regarded as an inconvenience in a geopolitical chess match. What once appeared to be a mutually beneficial alliance now feels more like a demand for compliance. The atmosphere is thick with unspoken words, and the weight of expectation becomes heavier with every second. The absence of journalists and the lack of eager faces to welcome him amplify the tension. It's no longer a visit to reinforce solidarity, it's a solitary plea filled with echoes of disappointment. As Zelensky approaches the waiting vehicle, the realization dawns: this isn't just another meeting, it is a reflection of shifting power dynamics, one that could alter the course of Ukraine's story forever. How did it come to this, with the fate of nations intertwined in the hands of those who won't even take a moment to acknowledge their ally? After a tense diplomatic flight, the stage is set for a confrontation that could reshape alliances. Zelensky's arrival in Washington was supposed to represent solidarity and mutual respect, but instead, he finds himself sidelined. The White House, void of warmth, is buzzing with the echoes of past engagements that filled the air with hope. Yet today, silence looms. As Zelensky steps onto the scene, his heart races, knowing he stands in the heart of power. But everything feels off. Instead of friendly greeting, he's met with a chilling announcement. Trump shifts focus, discussing his recent dialogue with Putin, Zelensky's adversary. Suddenly, the gravity of the moment sinks in: he's not a partner here, he's a spectator in a game that's no longer his. Questions hang in the air, unasked but heavy with implication. The journalists, sensing the tension, prod further, seeking clarity on military support. Trump, with icy resolve, bluntly states, this will lead to escalation. The room grows colder. Instead of promising aid, he offers a grave reminder that Ukraine's calls for powerful defenses might go unanswered. His words feel like shards of ice slicing through Zelensky's hopes. We want to finish this war, he says, offering no assurance of military might, just the unsettling implication of a possible new conflict ahead. And in that moment, it becomes clear, the tides have turned. The United States is distancing itself, leaving Ukraine naked against the storm. Zelensky's heart sinks as he realizes the bleak message being communicated: America is pivoting. And he remains unable to dictate the terms of his survival. With tension teetering on the edge of diplomacy's knife, we now turn toward the private whispers that will decide the fate of nations. Trump's tone shifts, revealing an agenda that has little to do with the suffering of Ukraine. As the briefing comes to an end, the unthinkable looms: a meeting with Putin is not just a rumor but a reality, and Zelensky will not be part of it. With everything on the line, can Zelensky still reclaim a position of strength, or is he destined to be a mere pawn in a game dictated by the whims of others? As the doors close and the quiet settles, one question echoes resonantly: is Ukraine's fate about to be sealed behind closed doors? Summary: the tension in the room is palpable as President Zelensky sits opposite Trump. The weight of their complex relationship lingers in the air. While Zelensky hopes for vital support, Trump shifts the focus, signaling a dramatic change in dynamics. Their conversation spirals into unexpected territory, leaving Zelensky and his mission hanging by a thread. As the meeting unfolds, Zelensky can feel his heart pounding in his chest. He is staring at Trump's calm demeanor, but the undercurrent of anxiety flows through the room, heavy and almost suffocating. The silence is unsettling as Trump's eyes narrow slightly. He isn't just a figurehead, he's a strategist in a game where Ukraine's cause risks being overshadowed. Then, the unthinkable happens. Trump casually mentions plans for a future meeting with Putin in Budapest, a city that now feels like a knife twisting in Zelensky's gut. The choice of location, a decision anchored deep in political maneuvering, isn't lost on those present. Trump smiles, as if this revelation is a token of goodwill, leaving Zelensky feeling like a marionette, strings cut, a pawn on a chessboard he barely understands. The journalists, eyes wide and pens poised, capture the moment, reflecting shock and disbelief, but Zelensky can hardly absorb it. How had the tide turned so dramatically? The warmth from past support is replaced by a chill that promises nothing but formality. The rapport he once believed they shared has vanished, leaving behind only hollow words and empty gestures. The gravity of the situation crashes down. Trump's proclamation resonates throughout the room: we do not want escalation. We do not need risks. With that, he signals the end of the discussion about critical military assistance for Ukraine, a unilateral decision that cuts deep. Zelensky shifts in his seat, realizing that the requests he brought are likely to be buried beneath the weight of this chilling declaration. With every word Trump speaks, it becomes evident that he sees not a partner, but merely an obstacle. The realization is haunting: Ukraine, once the focus of international sympathy, has become just another piece in a greater game, the stakes higher than ever. As the meeting draws to a close, there's no hand of empathy extended, no comforting words, just the pressing silence of defeat. Zelensky is ushered out, a storm brewing inside him. He glances back at Trump, who is already strategizing the next steps, seemingly oblivious to the chaos he leaves behind. The world has changed in mere moments. And as Zelensky steps outside, he knows this chill won't warm anytime soon. With one meeting, the fate of nations has been altered forever. In a high-stakes diplomatic landscape, nothing was resolved. No agreements, no proposals, not even a scant acknowledgement of the issues Ukraine brought to the table. In his briefing, President Zelensky drew attention solely to the American side, while the pressing matters faded unnoticed, denied a platform even in the press release. Tension crackled in the air, thick enough to cut. Trump's demeanor was unnervingly calm as he asserted, we do not want escalation. We do not need risks. The gravity of his declaration loomed, rendering weapons like the tomahawk irrelevant in this new reality. It wasn't merely a policy shift, it was a signal to Europe that America was stepping back from its role as an active player. Trump's comments hung heavily, filling the atmosphere with foreboding. Journalists noted the conversation was stilted and devoid of warmth, echoing the emptiness felt in the room. What shape does partnership take when one side is merely a backdrop? For Zelensky, this felt like a disaster unfolding. With no formal photographs or compassionate gestures towards the press following the closed-door discussions, the stark silence spoke volumes. As Zelensky returned to a residence charged with unsaid words, he grappled with what had transpired. Trump, however, was moving forward, eyeing a future meeting, not in the traditional political fault lines of Washington, but in Budapest. Why Budapest? This wasn't a mere whim. Orbán was seen as a mediator, a figure propped up in a complex geopolitical chess game. With Russia and the USA negotiating sans Ukraine, the stakes were dire. The Ukrainian territory had lost its significance, now merely serving as a backdrop where others calculated their moves. As Trump prepared for yet another encounter, one could sense an unsettling twist of fate that would leave Ukraine straddling the edge of a world that had swiftly turned its back. How had the stage transformed so decisively? The implications of this shift are profound, and the echoes of betrayal could resound across the political battlefield. Is this a reassessment of alliances, or has Ukraine become an afterthought in the grand narrative? The sense of unpredictable unease loomed, foreshadowing a critical turning point in history where the fate of nations lay tangled in the aspirations of others. Amidst the swirling storm of international politics, a shocking twist unfolds. The former President of the United States, Donald Trump, seems to be shifting his stance about the ongoing conflict, plunging the future of Ukraine into uncertainty. As Trump prepares to meet Vladimir Putin in Budapest, a city symbolizing neutrality, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky arrives in Washington, only to find no welcoming committee awaiting him. An empty reception and a shadow-frosted atmosphere cloak his visit, marking a stark shift in alliances. Zelensky steps off his plane. Silence hangs heavily in the air. Not a single American flag stirs in the breeze. No officials stand ready to greet him. The delegation is sparse, just a few aides and security personnel. Absence looms larger than presence. Why has the United States pulled back? This stark contrast to previous receptions where honor and tribute shaped the landscape of diplomacy raises alarming questions. As reports filter through, a jarring realization dawns in Ukraine. The West's representation stumbles. Where are the symbols of partnership? Europeans discuss a world potentially crafted without Ukrainian influence, and the chilling thought circles, is this a new reality? The conversation shifts underground, held away from the glaring eye of the press. Reluctant voices whisper about alternative strategies. Ukraine is relegated to the sidelines in a game it desperately wants to influence. In the face of this diplomatic cold front, Zelensky's team scrambles to control the narrative. Constructive discussion seems surreal in their vagueness, no numbers, no promises. Words dull the ache of reality. The media attempts to paint a rosy picture, sharing images of past camaraderie, but viewers sense the breach. As phones buzz with promised support, we linger on unease. The veneer of hope is swiftly cracking under pressure, exposing a raw inner turmoil. Meanwhile, Trump and Putin plot their next moves, leaving Ukraine's future uncertain. The land once steeped in promises is now a pawn in a much larger game. The specter of political fatigue haunts the proceedings. How will Zelensky navigate this new landscape where allies turn away and foes close in? As the negotiation tables turn, it becomes glaringly clear, the fight for Ukraine is shifting from the battlefield to the halls of power, where deals are made in shadows, and the very identity of a nation is at stake. The story follows Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who faced a stark and unexpected reality upon his arrival in Washington. While seeking American support, he was greeted not with a diplomatic embrace but with an eerie silence. The absence of any welcoming delegation spoke volumes. His plane touched down in the capital, but instead of bustling activity, there was only an oppressive stillness. No flags, no smiles, just the quiet hum of engines going cold. As Zelensky stepped off the aircraft, the contrast couldn't have been more jarring. Usually surrounded by a flurry of diplomatic pomp, this time he found himself alone, flanked only by a handful of aides, a few security personnel, and a skeleton crew from the flight. Their intentions were palpable, but so was the disappointment in the air. This wasn't just an oversight, it was a signal. In a world that once celebrated his visits, this felt like a complete degradation. Witnesses at the scene felt the chill of diplomacy gone awry. American officials seemed absent on purpose. Was this the end of the alliance that had defined the last 3 years? In the meeting that followed, when both leaders finally convened, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Trump, instead of extending the support Zelensky hoped for, focused on signaling a new direction. Discussions around Putin and a potential peace deal dominated the discourse, pushing Zelensky into the role of a mere listener rather than an important ally. The cold reality sunk in as Trump stated bluntly that the U.S. aimed to de-escalate tensions rather than intensify them with powerful weaponry like the Tomahawk missiles. Zelensky's hopes for new military aid crumbled as the rhetoric shifted. While Trump touted a desire for peace, answerable to a conflict far removed from Ukrainian interests, the message unfolded ominously: the U.S. was preparing to pull back. Zelensky was left grappling with the enormity of the shift. His pleas seemed to fade into the walls of the closed meeting room as Trump prepared to meet with Putin, not in Washington, the expected locale, but in Hungary instead. Zelensky was not just sidelined, he was left in the dark. Now, facing the potential abandonment by allies, the bitter truth emerged: the strategic ground had shifted. America, once a steadfast partner, was seeking to reassess priorities without regard for Kyiv's urgent needs. The very essence of their alliance now lay in jeopardy. As he made his way back home, Zelensky could feel the weight of what had just transpired. The shift in alliances and the depth of diplomatic neglect echoed loudly. The world was watching, and what followed would be a chilling reminder that in the geopolitics of war, trust and assurances could vanish in an instant. How had a situation spiraled so quickly, leaving Ukraine to navigate the complexities without its strongest ally? In the previous part, we explored Ukraine's alarming realization that it no longer holds sway in diplomatic discussions concerning its fate. President Zelensky's pivotal visit to Washington failed to yield any concrete support, leaving Ukraine isolated. The gravity of the situation became evident when Trump's words signaled a withdrawal from aggressive military aid, diminishing any prospect for Ukraine's defense against Russian advances. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the geopolitical landscape, a chilling reality settled in. The battlegrounds of Ukraine remain tense, yet the talks are not happening in Kyiv anymore. Instead, Moscow seizes this opportunity, preparing to entrench its grip on the status quo while Kyiv is left watching from the sidelines. Zelensky, who once commanded attention, now holds his breath, waiting for a call that may never come. With thunderous echoes of regret ringing in his ears, he realizes the world has begun to strategize without him. While Zelensky speaks of victory, the world around him whispers of peace, as the West grows disinterested in the firestorm consuming Ukraine. Was this a betrayal or a stark reality check? The very weapons that could have turned the tide are now deemed unnecessary or dangerous. In a shocking twist, Trump announces no more Tomahawk missiles for Ukraine, signaling a decisive pivot away from direct involvement. The silence that follows is deafening. There's a simmering anxiety in Kyiv as officials scramble to maintain an illusion of control. However, the truth is as stark as the winter wind cutting through the streets. Control has long slipped through their fingers. Meanwhile, Trump and Putin, the titans of this tragic tale, prepare for their own meeting in Budapest. This is not a stage set for Ukraine. Leaders discussing safety and strategy are bypassing Kyiv entirely. Orban stands as a silent witness, all while Zelensky presents a facade of triumph, insisting the visit was successful. But his heart, heavy with disappointment, knows better. The conversations that shape his country's future occur without him, leaving him to grapple with an unsettling truth. In the grand scheme of international politics, he is no longer a pivotal player. The door to diplomacy has slammed shut, and as the dust settles, it's clear. The very essence of Ukraine's voice is fading. With mounting dread, Zelensky returns home, wrestling with the reality that while nations gather to discuss his fate, his voice is rendered almost voiceless. It seems the story has taken a darker turn, but will the tides of fate bring another chance for Ukraine, or is this the end of the line for its leadership on the world stage?